to the Me, Myself, and Hopefully You podcast. My name is Tarek, a university student who has no idea what he wants to do with his life, and so I decided to start a podcast in the middle of first year that was riddled by COVID and basically just ruined everything. Why did I start a podcast? Because everyone seems to be doing it, and I thought it's probably the best way to meet some people. And since then, I've had some incredible conversations with Navy SEAL veterans, with ex-Wall Street vice presidents, professional actors, people that have been in prison for over 2 decades. And today I sit with an ex-professional footballer who scored the greatest ever goal in football history, right? If the Puskas awards were, I don't know if that's how you say it, but if they were alive and well back in 2007, he would have won the Puskas Award for the one goal he scored for the United States of America against Mexico. Now, I know what you're thinking. What do Americans know about football? They don't know anything. They're rubbish. Well, listen. This American actually does know about football. I mean, in fact, he even calls it football sometimes, right? Not all the time. Sometimes he calls it soccer. We'll forgive him on that because most of the time he calls it football, and that's what we like to hear. Anyway, I sit down with an ex-professional footballer by the name of Jimmy Conrad. Yes, Jimmy Conrad, the famous Twitch streamer / ex-YouTuber, because he doesn't really do much YouTube anymore, and now he's a presenter. We talk everything about how he got interested in football from his Danish grandfather, how he moved over to Poland to play all of the game and then punched them back and then made them bleed, and just the entire process, which is just crazy. And his advice for young people who maybe they're in football, maybe they're not, but he's got some amazing advice that really kind of apply to every single one of us. It was an absolute pleasure to sit with him, and I can't wait for you to watch it. So without further ado, my guest at this time, it is the Jimmy Conrad. So, Jimmy, I want to start off with just asking you, just to introduce yourself a little bit. Who are you? What do you do? How did you end up scoring the most amazing goal in MLS in American football history? Now, we'll get onto that later, but just a little explanation as to who you are.
I'm a California kid. I was born in Los Angeles, California. My grandparents were from Denmark. That's how I got my start in the game. My grandfather would kick the ball with me in the backyard. I know it's not normal, say, for a stereotypical American kid to be introduced to the beautiful game at such a young age. I have that privilege. And then I had some really good youth coaches along the way that really inspired me to keep pushing. And that led going to university, playing in MLS, playing in a World Cup, playing for the national team, being a captain for the national team stuff. But I had to earn everything that I got. And I think that's what makes it feel a little bit more special, as most former athletes do when they retire into full game and going to games and doing vlogs and all that type of stuff. And then that turned into hosting gigs for EA Sports. And now I work for CBS Sports. They have the Champions League, and I'm a partnered channel on Twitch. I have a 1-year deal with them, and I'm just riding the wave. And I've got my surfboard out, and I'm trying to make this wave last as long as humanly possible. It's been an amazing career professionally for me, both as a player and now afterwards. And I'm enjoying every minute of it.
Well, you're absolutely smashing it. It's so weird just watching you here or speaking to you, because I feel like I'm watching you on YouTube, you know, with the background. it's mental. I wasn't expecting you to have that background. I thought you might be in some random room or something. So
no.
Being able to sit with you, you know, I've been a huge fan since I think Kick TV days. I think that's when I first watched you. And yeah, it's such a pleasure to have you on. I want to start off with just sort of you mentioned at the beginning there, you know, you're United States, you know, a Cali boy. You described yourself as you're born in 1977. I know you probably don't want me to remind you of that.
That's okay.
You don't look like you were born in 1977.
I'll take that.
You're born in 1977. I doubt soccer, as you would call it, is, you know, sort of was, you know, very common back then. I mean, I doubt it's very common even now. Tell me a bit more about that story with your granddad teaching you about playing the game.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, I it's kind of funny. Where do I start here? My parents had me when they were 18 years old, and they broke up before I was born. So ultimately, what I would do is, when my mom and dad were both working, to try to get money to make sure they could pay for rent and my food and diapers and all that good stuff, I would be over at my grandparents' house a lot. And so my grandmother took a lot of care of me, and that meant that I was introduced to a lot of their cultural identity, let's say, and what they saw and what they enjoyed in their life. So that meant I was in the backyard with my grandfather quite a bit, and he introduced me to the game and kind of kept, you know, it's one thing to just show you once, but he's out there kicking with it, you know, pretty regularly, and making sure that I could see, I guess in some ways, as a father myself, if your kid can understand how much this particular sport or this particular music or art or whatever it is, if they can tell you're passionate about it, they're instantly drawn to that as well, because wow, if that makes my dad or mom that happy, I wonder what that's about. And so I immediately picked up on that from my grandfather. He loved the game. He loved it so much. Now, my dad, he passed away when I was 11, so I never really got to see my grandfather, let's say, at his peak. But my dad said he thought he was a better player than he really was, which is really funny. But his enthusiasm and passion for the game was unparalleled. And it was a great opportunity for me to be around that, to especially at a young age, to pick up on that passion and enthusiasm. And I think I saw how much it meant to him when I would play. He'd come watch me play when I was very young, and he'd be on the sideline stalking around. And this is a true story. At age 6 or 7, I was one of those kids that was scoring 3 goals a game. Game was easy for me and really not much competition. He was like proud grandfather on the sideline.
Yeah.
And then the next season, they pushed me up a year. So now it's a little bit harder. The kids are a little bit bigger, a little bit faster. I'm not having as much success. And he told my dad that I was finished, that I was washed,
Wow.
and I'm not good enough to become anything. And as I learned, yeah, I didn't know that, but my dad tells me that now. It's super funny that's how like big and the swings were. That's how much it mattered to my grandfather. So I imagine how proud he would have been if he'd stayed alive and saw me play in a World Cup. But you know, it was at that moment that I had a chance. I was playing baseball too, and I remember having a really like a coach who's like, "Hey, if you want to dedicate to one sport or the other, I'm starting a team, but you can only pick. You can't play baseball. You only have to play soccer." And I was like, "Yeah, baseball's boring, dude." So I'm 100% going to play soccer, and that's kind of where it started from there. And like I said, I had some very good coaches along the way that not only had that passion and enthusiasm, but also knew how to teach the game. And I think that's what we lacked a lot when I was a kid growing up, was there wasn't a lot of good teachers about the game itself. And that's changing rapidly here. There's so many more players that are playing now. I still feel like our coaching and our scouting and our refereeing, like all that stuff matters. If all that's really good, it helps elevate the game and give the players that experience that they need to continue to get better themselves.
Because that's what I was going to ask you. You know, back then, especially, like America has all these other sports that it does so well at, and it's massively emphasized. It's always, you know, huge. And then you're going out, you know, and you're deciding to play football or soccer. You know, It's completely different. I'm surprised you even, there was even one coach that said, "Oh, I'm going to make an actual team," because of how big the other sports are. What do you think is the biggest difference then between? I know you mentioned there slightly, but what's the biggest difference between sort of what you had and then what these sort of newly bred, you know, footballers that are coming in, what they're getting?
I would say visibility. When I was a kid, it was almost impossible to find a game on TV. You'd have to go down to the pizza joint down the street, and it was one of those like grainy black and white televisions, and you're trying to watch the '86 World Cup, and you can barely make out who's who, but you understand, you know, that what the score is. That's essentially what you know, and then you just react if you see a goal. But it was really hard to have that access to watch games, and now I think that's changed. If you're a young player in this country, you now can go to games live with MLS, or we have the fledgling, you know, infrastructure that's starting to happen with the USL. So we have a very vibrant second division and third division now, and I help coach in the fourth division. We can save that for later, but there's just so much more access to the game. And also there not only can you go watch a game live, which is, as you know, is important, because if you go to a game live, you pick up on things that you can't see on television. And a lot of it's off the ball movement. Oh, so that's how the number 10 creates space between the lines to pick up the ball so we can run at defenders. These are all these little subtleties and nuances that us kids didn't have access to. We couldn't go see that for ourselves and to take those mental notes so that we could start to visualize us doing the same thing. And that's why I think we're a little bit, or we're behind. I think we're catching up now quite rapidly, but we still have a long way to go, of course. And that changed. And then obviously now with when YouTube exploded and you could watch Ronaldinho's top 5 highlights with some EDM music, you know, I mean, all that type of style, and then being able to replicate those moves and to see them do it in real time, super important. So all of that, I think, has now started to inspire the next generation to be like, I can be as good as those players because I've seen it And if I just practice and put the time in, and that's where the gap is too. They have a lot of young people that want to skip steps, right? With this new generation of social media where you can be viral, but anybody can be viral in like 10 seconds. Nobody necessarily always wants to put the work in to be as great as they possibly could be. And that's where ultimately I won. I wasn't the most talented player, but man, I would outwork you day after day after day.
I mean, yeah, no, well, that's a brilliant way to follow up to my next sort of question about how there would obviously have been less competition for you back then compared to now. What do you make of that? You know, has anyone said, oh, well, it was easy for you, you know, you had less people to compete with?
Sure.
Does that get on your nerves a little bit, or do you go, no?
I think, no. When people say that, I know pretty quickly that they don't know, that they didn't live it, and they don't exactly know what they're talking about. They're not wrong. So I don't want to say that they're wrong. What's more difficult is the amount of teams that are, let's just use MLS. When I was in MLS, there was 10 teams. So, and you had to make the 18-man roster. That's it. So there were 180 spots to get on an MLS roster. And now there's 27 or 28, 29 teams in MLS. You can have rosters up to 25 to 30 players. That seems a little bit easier. Not necessarily easier, but it seems like you at least get a look. You'll at least get a potential chance if you've got an iota of talent, or if you've done something that warrants being considered for that position. 180 players. So now you extrapolate that to what, 500, 550 players. Now more players are competing, but you also have a better chance of being seen. So because there's more scouts, the infrastructure is more evolved. So I don't know. It's apples and oranges ultimately, but there were only 180 spots back in the day. And a lot of those were like, well, I'll give you this. DC United, okay, back in 96, 97, 98, when they won a bunch of MLS Cups, when the league started, every single one of their starting players was a national team player, whether for Bolivia with Marco Echeverri or John Harkes, who was captain of the US. Like, everybody was a national team player on their starting lineup. It was insane. You go to any MLS team now, and you might have 4, 5 tops national team players on one team from all over the world, maybe, right? So yes, in some ways, it's easier, or was easier back then, but also kind of harder. It just depends on how you want to slice the apple here. But I think it's kind of hard to compare because of where things were going and how things were evolving. So I don't know. I don't take anything away from people that put the time in to become pro athletes now, and hopefully they don't dismiss or disregard all the sacrifice that I put into it as well.
No, I mean, hopefully they don't. I don't think they do, because, when I was doing the research for this interview, you did have to go. You didn't go the sort of normal route back then. So I mean, I think if I'm right, you won the NCAA championship, but then you weren't drafted by the MLS, and so you had to go. If I'm right in saying, you had to go to the league below.
That's right.
Yeah, in order to sort of make your way in. I think it was San Diego, and then you got onto the San Jose Earthquakes.
Look at you. I love that.
I know, yeah, doing the research, always doing
That's
the
right.
research.
I love it.
So I want to ask you about that. Like, what did it feel like to be undrafted by the MLS? You're on the championship winning team. So
yeah.
If I were you, I'd be thinking, right, I've got a chance. Surely I should be getting into the MLS here.
Well, yes, of course. So I played for UCLA, which was one of the better college teams in the country. And the previous year, we were number 1 in the country. We went into the special March Madness tournament instead of basketball. It's for college soccer. And we got knocked out in the first round by Cal State Fullerton. And so, okay, great. Wow, that sucked. And I wasn't playing much. I was a bit of a spot starter for my junior year. The guy that played in front of me, Taj Jenkins, got drafted number 1 in MLS after that season. So you can kind of speak to the quality. So the following year, my senior year, I'm still not really starting. We went from a back 4 to a back 3. So that meant one less spot in the back line. And we had Carlos Bocanegra, who played for Fulham and the U.S. for a long time. He was on my team. Nick Raimondo played for a long. We were stacked in the when you looked at it now, given all the careers that a lot of us had. But I still wasn't starting, and I was kind of in and out, and I was really frustrated. Didn't feel like I was ever getting my chance. And then the guy that was started in front of me, a senior, Kevin Coy, he tore his knee 5 minutes into the first playoff game. And I knew then that the coach, Ziggy Schmid, who had a decorated career in MLS and one of the most successful coaches in MLS history and college history as well, he had no other choice but to play me. So there's nobody else behind me. So I played, and we crushed it. We only gave up 1 goal through the championship run. and I was a champion. And there was 5 seniors on that UCLA team, and the other 4 seniors got drafted, and I did not. And that hurt because I thought I had done enough to warrant some consideration, especially in that draft. There were other players getting drafted from Southern Connecticut State. I was like, I've never even heard of this university. Who are these guys? You know? So,
Yeah.
so there was some ego hits there for sure. And you know what happened? And it ended up being the best thing that ever happened to me. And so I want to really send this message to people, because everybody thinks that point A to point B, like I'm here and I want to get up there and it's going to be a straight line. You might work towards that straight line, but there's the ups and downs as you work your way up. And I needed that down of not getting drafted to really first force me to decide if I really wanted it or not. Like, do I want to suffer? I'm suffering right now. My ego took a big hit. I was on top of the world as one of the best college players or on the best college teams in the country. And now what? And it hurt. And so I had to figure out exactly, this is what I wanted. Am I going to pursue this? And if I'm going to pursue it, I got to give it everything I have. There can't be any half-assing it. And if I fail, I fail, but at least I gave everything that I had. So there's a lot of like important messages here. And what I learned through that process was I went down to San Diego to a lower league team. I made $800 a month. I slept on floors. I was eating, off of $5, $10 worth of food a day. And I would train in the morning with the team. And I would go to the gym or go run on the beach or play soccer tennis with a tennis ball. I was doing anything I possibly could in the afternoons to even get better. So I was doing all of this. And what ended up happening was I played 30 games in 6 months. And because San Diego is so close to the Mexican border, we got some of the top professional Mexican teams to come over. We played Necaxa, we played Toluca. Those were invaluable experiences because all of a sudden you're exposed to another level of play. And you're like, oh, that's what it's supposed to look like. Oh, that's how they gain little advantages to create space for themselves. Oh, that's what an elbow feels like right in the face, So there were all these little things that I learned along the way. And I got 30 really valuable games in 6 months. And I learned how to be a pro without any, when you're in university, you're still playing with your friends. Here, you're competing you're putting food on your table against other grown-ass men. And it's a whole different mentality. And I needed that little buffer. Had I gone to MLS right away, I guarantee you I would have sat on the bench and just watched other people play. So to have those experiences of learning how to be a pro and learning how to prepare for a game and what I should eat and how I should rest and how I need to take care of myself and what am I super, super valuable. When I look back on my whole career, that was one of my most enjoyable years of my professional career because I didn't know if I was going to make it or not, but I gave it everything that I had. And at the end of that year, San Jose gave me a call and they said, hey, we want you to come up and for 2 weeks. And at the end of it, we're going to play against another Mexican league team. I'm like, oh, wow, I'm familiar with this. So I got to play the last 20 minutes. I trained really well. And then they signed me the following year and I took off from there. But it was so valuable for me to take that step back, to learn, not skip any steps and to learn so many different things that I feel like if I didn't have that experience, I don't know if I would be talking about the same career that I did end up having.
Well, it's weird because I got that same feeling, obviously having watched you for a long time, but then also doing the research for this. I got that same feeling of it was almost like a blessing in disguise. But obviously at the time you didn't know it. But like when I look at your career, when I was doing the research, I was seeing that, well, if you hadn't gone to San Diego Flash, then I think the coach of San Diego knew the coach of San Jose Earthquake.
That's right. Yeah. That's right. Yep.
And so that link wouldn't have happened. And then you wouldn't have, again, like you said, you would have been on the bench. So then what would have your career been like? It's like those downs in life are usually the points at which, it's like almost a recharge. You go down, you recharge, and you push back up again. And I think that's why so many people love your story and resonate with it. And I think the mention of Mexico here, again, it seems like Mexico starts playing a bigger role in your life. So, but we'll get into that eventually.
I do want to say for the record, and I said this because I think it's important. And I said this to my daughter because she was going through some struggles. She's playing and not everything's going her way. And ultimately, this is the same question I had to answer myself when I was getting hit in the face, metaphorically with things not going my way when I thought they should, given all the success I was having. And it's, what are you going to do about it? Are you going to go and just bitch to your friends and feel sorry for yourself? And there's time for that. And I want to give everybody room you need to have room to work through your sadness and your frustration and your disappointment. No question. I don't think you should pretend that doesn't exist. You should definitely work through it. But at some point, you have to be, what am I going to do about it? Am I going to believe what somebody else says about me? And that was a big fundamental moment for me as well. that it's up to me to decide how good I'm going to be at anything. I had people tell me I wasn't good enough to be a pro. Professional scouts, nah, he's not quick enough. He's not big enough. He's not whatever. He's not whatever you want to fill in the blank. He's not. I don't have it. I don't have a good left foot. Whatever.
Granddad
blah, blah, blah.
said it.
Right. What's that?
Even your own granddad said it.
Exactly. So you're fighting all this, but then when you realize and take ownership of your own life, and you're like, actually, it's up to me to decide how good I'm gonna be at anything. That's when everything started to change for me, and that was a big fundamental moment. And I'm trying to instill and plant those seeds with my two kids for the same types of things. You're gonna get knocked down. The straight line isn't gonna be straight. You're gonna have some ups and downs. And when you have your downs, what are you gonna do about it? How are you gonna respond? And I just happened to respond in a positive way. But it wasn't like everything was puppy dogs and rainbows. When I did respond, like there's so much struggle along the way. And there's so many days where you're like, did I do the right thing? Am I doing the right thing? Am I knocking on the right doors? Is this going to work out the way that I want? There's a whole bunch of that doubt along the way, but I never stopped pushing in that direction, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, I mean, it definitely does. So I've just recently recorded an episode of the podcast, which is coming out next week, about with a guy who's a Navy SEAL for 26 years.
Wow.
He was telling me about how, the whole process of trying to be a Navy SEAL, it's about breaking down, and it's about mentality and how you're thinking, I need to push through this and get to that next stage. There's no time to be, I mean, obviously in real life situation, you should take the time to sort of, feel bad. If you're feeling low, then take that time, but it's about getting back up, feeling stronger, and becoming better. And you're talking about that line, it's not so straight. Your career sort of went completely in a different path, because you ended up playing in Poland for a little bit for Lech Poznan.
I did,
which is mental. Like, I didn't even know this before I did the research. What was that like? How is the game different in Poland than in America? You were playing in Europe, which must have been a pretty good feeling as well, because my assumption is in America, everyone wants to eventually play in Europe, regardless of where it is, at least you're playing in Europe. What was that experience like, and what did it teach you?
Well, so it was after my second year in MLS, and my team was terrible. The Earthquakes that particular year just couldn't get it going. And we'd had a lot of old guys and young guys. The young guys weren't old enough yet to really take on that responsibility. Well, so it was after my second year in MLS, and my team was terrible. The Earthquakes that particular year just couldn't get it going. And we'd had a lot of old guys and young guys. The young guys weren't old enough yet to really take on that responsibility. And the old guys were kind of bitter and a little bit too old. It just wasn't the right mix of people. And so we got knocked out. We didn't make the playoffs in MLS. And so that gave us a lot of free time. And one of my players, one of the rookies, was named Wojtek Krakowiak. He just won the Heisman Trophy for soccer in this country in college the year before, prior to us drafting him. He's a little guy, cute as a button, great feet, but I think the game might have been a little bit too physical for him at times. And once he got to MLS itself, and he ended up falling out. But at that point, he was still on our team. We drafted him. And once the season ended, he had a connect at Lech Poznan. And they were struggling so bad, Poznan, that the coach was like, hey, do you have any other young players that might want to get some experience? We could just kind of, nice way to freshen the squad up. We're pretty low income, like they're not going to pay us much. We were not necessarily free. They were going to house us and all that stuff, but it was relatively cheap, all things considered. So it was me, Ian Russell, and Wojtek Krakowiak, and we all went over there. And initially I was a little bit hesitant because I thought Poland isn't, it's not Spain, it's not Italy, it's not England, it's not one of the top 5 European
leagues. It's not
leagues.
the top 5, yeah.
Yeah, so even at that point, I was a bit of an elitist, and I'm kind of bummed I even had that initial thought, because given the experience I'd had with San Diego Flash, I knew the benefit of getting out of your comfort zone to try to get better. And it didn't take long, but one of the older guys on my team convinced me, like, just go do it. It's going to be an amazing life experience. And he was right. So I went on loan, and we played there for 4 or 5 months, which was a pretty extensive loan, I would say. And the whole experience for me was great. Like, Wojtek and Ian didn't start a lot, and they ended up getting hurt. And I played 15 games. Like, I was a pretty much automatic starter from the beginning. The crowd was chanting my name when we left our last game. And it was a really special experience, and I learned a lot. What I learned is that they don't think Americans can play. And this isn't even like other players. This is your own teammates. They just like, why are we getting all these Americans? So there was these little baby steps you had to take to win over your teammates, and then to win over the fans, and then to be able to hold your own against, these opposing players who really had nothing but disrespect for you. I got spit on, I got punched in the face, all kinds of different stuff. I got punched in the face one time during the game, and then the guy started laughing and went and stood by the referee. Like the referee was going to be on my side for anything, So I had to learn how to protect myself. And about 10 minutes later, he was the forward, and I waited before the ball got to him, and I was marking him from behind, and I went underneath his arm and punched him right in the face. And
wow.
I had to get a little bit tougher, because if you just go out there and keep taking your own shots and people can get free shots and you're never going to fight back, what are you going to do? And I took a risk. The referee didn't see it, but the other coach saw it, and he took out the player. The player was bleeding. He was upset. And I said, well, you shouldn't, what do you think? You get a free shot and I don't, so there was a lot of those little moments, and it's another opportunity to get thicker skin and to be vulnerable, because I'm out there and they don't think you can play. Now you have to prove yourself in so many different ways. And I was playing so well that Bundesliga teams ultimately were looking at me. The coach pulled me aside. He's like, hey, wow, you played really, because we played I think we played Werder Bremen in a friendly, closed door friendly. And there was nothing about the game that I thought was overwhelming. I didn't think the gap was that big. What I tell actually the players I coach now, and when you take those steps, and since I've been at every step, the only thing that changes is that everybody makes their decisions a little bit quicker, and they just make less mistakes. Now, if you keep pushing that up and you go play in a World Cup, nobody makes mistakes. And the mistakes they make are like half mistakes. And even then, you have to be excellent and you have to be on top of your game to be able to exploit those mistakes that are being made. Not only on an individual level, but like tactically, can you unlock their tactics quickly? And once they figure out that you've unlocked it, they adjust. So then can you now readjust? I love all that. And my time, I played in 2 World Cup games, and I loved every single second of it, because the game is just so fast, and you just have to draw everything that you have out of yourself to play. It was amazing. But going back to this Lech Poznan experience, it was cool to be a part of something where everything mattered to the town. So if we won at home, well, we could go out. Food was free, drinks were free. Everybody knew who you were. Like the front page of the paper was about our team. Like the whole city was locked in on the team. And then if we lost at home, then it was unsafe for you to go out, because there would be the fans would want to fight you after a couple of drinks, and it just wasn't. So imagine the stakes where you come from an MLS where, MLS is still growing and just getting started, hasn't really made the inroads with the community yet. And then you go over here where it's just everything matters, how you play, how you perform, how you conduct yourself off the field. And that was awesome. And I loved every second of it. However, we did have our goalkeeper. I think he threw one of the games. We were up 1-0, very good goalkeeper. And he made 2 uncharacteristic mistakes against the team. We were in cruise control, up 1-0. And then he gave up 2 bad goals. And it looked, now in hindsight, I think he probably got paid to throw the game, because the goals were so bad. But the fans knew it. The fans jumped over the barbed wire fence. We had crazy hooligans, by the way. Just imagine big, giant 6'5" Polish hooligans. Jumped over the barbed wire fence, came into our locker room to beat this guy up. I was like, where am I? And this is kind of secretly awesome at the same time, that it matters to these fans. And the security, all the security for the club was all old ex-players that were like 65 and could barely move anymore. So they had no chance against these big hooligans, and it was chaos. I've never seen anything like it before that and after. I was just, this is unbelievable. But I was pissed at the goalkeeper too. I'm like, yeah, rough him up a little bit. That's some bullshit.
You were getting involved as well.
Yeah. So, but he's like, he locked himself into one of the showers, and he was crying, and it was bad. It was bad. I mean, they didn't hurt him, but they wanted to scare him, And I was like, this is insane. But it was a crazy experience. I loved every second of it. It helped me. I came back a lot tougher, not only physically tougher, but also mentally tougher. You know what I lost? I lost the innocence and naivete that comes from playing sometimes, where you think everybody's playing fair. Nobody's playing fair. And the sooner that you accept that, and everybody's trying to gain an advantage, and then it just makes you a little bit smarter about how the game is played. And I came back, and ultimately the next year we won MLS Cup the following year. And I was a big part of that.
Like, you went there like a weak centre-back, and you came back like Pepe.
Exactly.
Just like slide-tagging everyone, and everyone's thinking, what's this guy doing? He's just playing friendly.
I dabbled in I got exposed to the dark arts of defending, and I'm very grateful for that because it helped me survive as the game continued to evolve here in the States.
What's it like for, I mean, you mentioned there, like there were games where they'd be chanting your name. What was it like for, you know, a foreign team? They had no idea who you were. They had this preconception that, you know, you were American, that you were probably had no idea what you were doing. Why did we bring these guys over? And now all of a sudden they're chanting your name. What's that feeling like when you've got the ball and then everyone's going, yeah? What's that like?
Yeah, well, for center back, it was unlike anything I had ever been a part of because they don't normally chant for center backs in the States or do anything. At that point, there was some organized chants. There was a supporters section for the Earthquakes at that time, but a lot of it was on the obvious stuff. And what I really appreciated about going over and playing in Europe was that I remember one time I was under a little bit of pressure. The other team was coming and I hit like a nice ball to switch the point of attack, and it unlocked the pressure. And all of a sudden the whole crowd starts cheering. And I just was like, I love this place. I love the fact that they understand that that was a good play and that needs to be appreciated because it was a tough pass, but it was the right exact decision in that moment to unlock the pressure so that we can maintain possession and go forward. And I just didn't ever get exposed to that back in the States. The sophistication of the fans at that time, even though there might have been a handful, wasn't the whole stadium appreciating that particular play. And that's changed. The fans are a lot more sophisticated in terms of their understanding of tactics and technical ability, which is great. And long may that continue. But those were the little things. And when you hit one of those, then you hit another one, they start chanting your name. You understand where it's coming from. It's not because I scored a goal and then they started chanting my name, which is the obvious stuff. It's for the little things that I was doing to help the team either hold another team under pressure or make a good pass to unlock something or whatever it may be. And that always meant a lot to me when they gave me that type of appreciation or chanted my name.
Have you ever gone back? Have you ever gone back to watch a game, or have you been recognized there?
Yes.
Or... Have you?
Well, so Lek follows me on Twitter, and for the longest time, not the longest time, but for a brief time. So after I left Lek, 5 or 6 years is where Robert Lewandowski ended up coming and playing for the club. So there was, I think, one World Cup, maybe it was 2006 or 2010, probably 2010. Where Robert Lewandowski and me were the only two players in Lech Poznan history to play in a World Cup. Oh, wow. So that was kind of cool to share that with Lewandowski for a little bit. Now that's since changed, but yeah. So I went back to Poznan for the Euros back in 2012 when Poland was hosting it and Russia were co-hosting it as well, or Ukraine was hosting it, Poland and Ukraine. And I went to one of the games in Poznan. It was Croatia versus Italy, and it was a great game. And it was cool to see. The stadium had been revitalized. They put a lot more money into it, and it was a proper stadium, and it was very, very cool. Because when I was there, it was still kind of the old school stadium that didn't have, you know, the big stands that had kind of extended up from there, but they had added those, and it was cool to go back, and a bit of deja vu in some ways. But I went back and I got treated very warmly by the city and the club, and it was great. It was a lot of fun, and I'm proud to be associated with Lech, especially since they came up with that one dance where you turn away from the field and you know move from left to right. So you know they've made some inroads in the European game for sure, and I obviously wish them a lot of success, especially against Legia Warsaw, who are our biggest rivals. There was a thing I was like, so I was spray painted on the walls. It's KURWA, and then it would say, you know, like Kurva Legia. I'm like, God, what's this? Well, at that time, I didn't know that the W was a V. So I'm like, what's this Kurwa Legia stuff, you know? And it means F Legia. Oh, and okay. So, yeah, which is amazing. So they had that spray painted all over Poznan, Kurva Legia, which is like, you know, F our biggest rivals. And that was the funniest thing. So anytime I run into a Lech supporter, I always go Kurva Legia, you know, and they just start laughing. It's amazing.
Okay, I need to remember that. If I ever go to Poland and I go to Lech, I need to remember to say that. And then
Kurva Legia. You're gonna have friends for life if you say exactly. That. Now you can't say that in Warsaw though, because that will get you. That'll get you.
I'll say the opposite. I'll say Kurva.
Yeah, Kurva Lech. Kurva Lech.
Just go around saying Kurva, whatever their rival is. You'll get free stuff everywhere. It'll be brilliant.
Yeah. That would be amazing.
Imagine. So, I mean, you mentioned like you went to Poland and you mentioned there how you lost your innocence. You became a bit more, you know, of a harder, solid defender. And it shows because you ended up getting traded in 2003 to the Kansas City Wizards. Mm-hmm. And then the Kansas City Wizards were they're nicknamed as the stingiest defense. Are you right? And you were the leader of that stingiest defense. this was a complete contrast to
San Jose.
Before in the San Jose earthquake.
Yeah.
Now you're on top of the world. What's that feeling like when you're no longer the underdog, you're the top guy now, and you're the leader of the defense as well?
Yeah, that was something I think I was ready for at that point. I think if you look back on my career, it was always kind of baby stepping my way to that type of responsibility, and not only from the coach and the team, but also being ready for it myself. When I played for San Jose, we played a lot of the back three. So, you see that now, which is kind of funny. It's now come back into fashion. Thanks, Thomas Tuchel, for bringing that back into fashion. But I would say that I was playing kind of on the right or left side of a back three, and never really in the middle. And I feel like the guy that's in the middle is really pulling the strings and really organizes everything. And given my personality, I thought that was a better fit for me, but I would never get it because they'd always give it to the older guy. So when I went to Kansas City my first year, we played a back three, and it was tough, and I wasn't playing in the middle. And I felt like my organizational skills and I learned very quickly. I was a teammate of Richard Goff, who played for Scotland in 2 World Cups and played for Everton for a long time towards the end of his career, and just Lionheart, I think is his nickname. I mean, that's like he is a legend for Scotland. And one of the things I asked him when I first joined San Jose was, you got any tips for me? And he just said, son, put out fires before they start. And I was like, oh, wow. What does that even mean? I mean, I got what it meant, but like, how do I apply that? And so it was an opportunity to organize and put guys in good spots. So I had to ultimately do less work, and everybody had to do less work. I put people in good starting spots ahead of me. Either cuts out passing lanes and makes things obvious for everybody, and that gives us less work. It just makes everything better. So as I started to really embrace that and understand, I just never was in a position to make that happen because we were always playing in the back three. Well, finally, unfortunately, the league MVP at that point, he was the league MVP on our team, Preki, in 2003 for MLS. He broke his leg in preseason. It was the grossest thing I've ever seen. And we immediately went from carrying him in a 3-man midfield where he didn't have to defend too much with a double pivot, and switched to a back four. And then all of a sudden I became a center back in a back four, and I took off from there. And all of a sudden I got to organize, and the game just felt easier, and I was ready for the responsibility. And then, we just didn't give up any goals. And it was a lot of fun. And it helped. I had Tony Miola behind me, who played in 2 World Cups for the US. And, you have these guys that have a lot of experience, and Kerry Zavagnin, who's now an assistant in Kansas City for many years, in front of us, and Diego Gutierrez. And, you're just around all these guys. And we had a really good team. And in fact, I just found out that our 2004 team, we won the cup competition. So we won our FA Cup over here, and we got to the final, and we were up 1-0. So we were your team that loved to win 1-0. So we got to the final against DC United. That was with the famous Freddie Adu year, when Freddie Adu is the big deal, super young, played in the league. And we won so many games 1-0. We went up 1-0 after 5 minutes. And I think that was like the kiss of death, because we're like, oh man, we got to hold the lead for 85 minutes. It's very new territory for us. DC scored 3 goals. 2 of them, or 1 was an own goal. 1 was controversial, should have been a handball, didn't get called, whatever. We ended up losing that 3-2. So we're 1 goal away from winning the double. But on top of that, over here, there's another trophy called the Supporter Shield, which was given to the best team in the regular season for whoever has the best record. We had the best record, but we tied that best record with somebody else. We had the same goal difference, but they had 2 more goals than we did. No, 1 more goal than we did. So they got it. They got that trophy because they had 1 more goal for than we did. So we were ultimately 3 goals away from winning 3 trophies, which is crazy. We would have gone down as one of the best MLS teams in history, if a couple things had gone our way a little bit different, which is really crazy to think about. So yeah, we were very good, and it was a lot of fun to be a part of. And because of the success of that team, I started to get called into the national team for the first time in 2005. I played in a World Cup a year later. I was part of the national team until 2010. And that was probably the year where I was really untainted, because I didn't get called in anymore. So because at that point, in 2004, I hadn't been called in yet. So I could really just focus on my club form. And then as you start to get called in, everything starts to change, because oh man, I'm a national team player now. You start to, not that you act different, but you start to treat the whole scenario, because you're like, oh, wow, I want to be good for my club, but I also want to be good for my country, So your focus just gets a little bit distracted as you get opportunities with the national team. Not in a bad way, but it just adds one more layer of pressure and expectation and all that stuff too.
What's that? So I mean, it's perfect segue into about the national team. What was it like, sort of, when you got called into the squad, and then
the moments before, like, you know, how are you preparing? How are you getting ready to go on the pitch? What's that entire process like to play for your national team, which is a completely another level?
Yeah. So I've been patiently waiting to get called to my national team for my whole life, but as I started to get an MLS and get more, just some looks, I just thought there were guys very similar to the guys that got drafted ahead of me back in the day when I was in college. Why are those guys getting called in and getting to look? And why am I not? I mean, when I try to look at everything as realistically as I can and understand that, okay, they're better at maybe this than that, but I got them in this area and I just could never understand why I'd never get a look. And so when I finally got called in to my first camp in 2005, it was like a month before I turned 28. And most players are getting looks at 19, 20, 21, but so I was a late bloomer. That's my nickname. I'm a late bloomer for sure. And when I finally got the call to come in, and the only reason I got called in was because somebody else, it was a January camp, and somebody else left to go over to Europe to try to play, Danny Califf, right? So it was crazy. So he goes to do something else. Like, I guess, well, who else is, how many other center back? Like, well, let's just give Jimmy a shot. Let's just see what happens. And when I finally got the call, I was like, yes, it's about goddamn time, So when I went in there, it was 3 weeks. It was kind of a special, unique camp that we have here because of how MLS season is. But I had 3 weeks to impress the coaches. And, anytime you're with a national team, more often than not, it's around a qualifying window or a Nations League thing. You're only with the team for a week and you probably have 2 games. It's hard to impress the coach because you don't have those trainings to really go toe to toe because either the top guys are resting for the game or whatever. But in these camps, this is a big opportunity, not for me to break into the starting 11, but for me to say, oh, he's got these qualities and he's better than everybody else that he's competing against. And that was really my only goal. I didn't say I'm going to play in a World Cup a year later. I kept my goals so simple and attainable that I just wanted to be better than the guys that I was competing against. And I think that's what helped me not get caught up in magnify how big of a moment this was for my career. And I kept everything really simple. And I just want to be better than that guy today. and so when we would run, I would try to get in the groups because we had some crazy running stuff. I would try to run in the groups with the players that I wanted to compete against. And I would just make sure I beat them. So every single thing we did, I tried to get in groups where I was competing. I'm going to be better than him today. I'm going to be better than him today. And that's all I did. And all of a sudden at the end of the 3 weeks, I was crushing it. I got called into the first World Cup qualifier of that year. And I didn't play, but I got to be part of the team. I was on the 23, didn't make the 18, but just to be around the team for a World Cup qualifier away from home was sick, so having all those experiences really helped. I got called into the Gold Cup, which is our Euros over here for CONCACAF. And I was the only player that played all 6 games. We won it, which was really, really cool. And what I wanted to do in that tournament was prove to the coaching staff that it's okay. I mean, I wanted to start, of course, but if I didn't start, I wasn't going to be a baby about it. I was just going to be a good teammate. And if they needed me in a pinch, I could be ready to go at any moment. They could put me in with 10 minutes to go and I would lock the game down, or they could put me on with half if somebody gets hurt. I'm still going to give you that good, consistent, solid performance every time. I want to be somebody you trust. And I went from that 3-week camp, beating out all the competitors that I had, to now going into this tournament, which is very similar to a World Cup, right? You have a group stage and all that stuff, which was very important. And I proved that I could be somebody they could trust in any situation. And I think that's why I ultimately got to make the World Cup team, because of all these things. And I was a good teammate and I was pushing the level and I was trying to make people better. And so it was a great experience. And based on everything that I had gone through before, it definitely prepared me for these moments. And I was mentally tough and ready to go for anything that came my way. And I don't think I could say the same if everything was handed to me right from the beginning.
Does it frustrate you then when you see players that aren't like the way you were? They're not good teammates. They're stroppy. I mean, I'm a Man United fan, so right now, thing about Anthony Martial, about whether he refused to, be on the bench and whether he's unhappy and whatever. Does that frustrate you? And does it get on your nerves that players aren't, being good teammates and looking to improve? They just want it the easy way and just want to be handed a first team spot.
Sure. I think with Anthony Martial, that particular situation, it just feels like there's more to it. I've been around enough and I try not to dive in, even when I'm doing my analysis work and acting like an idiot on my Twitch channel or YouTube or whatever. As much as I like to jump in and kind of give that knee-jerk reaction to his behavior, I also know, having lived it, that there's probably a couple things going on behind the scenes that nobody knows about. And that's hard. If you're a player that's trying to express themselves and your frustration or whatever, and you have to stay kind of in this box because that's what everybody expects out of you. But if you go past that box and people are going to call you a whiny baby or whatever, even though you know as a player that there's been things behind the scenes that haven't been cool and Manchester United haven't treated you well in some capacity, you know, and he's been there 7 years. So this isn't like a new thing. And also from a club perspective, not to just to defend the player, but from a club perspective, we could argue he hasn't necessarily lived up to his potential. So when he's gotten his opportunities, he hasn't made the most of those either. So there's a lot of gray area there, and it just kind of depends on where you want to lean. It doesn't look like the situation is going to end well, but at the moment, it doesn't look like Anthony Martial's attitude is helping him at all. And this is where agents come in, and this comes into, sometimes you get blinded and you get emotional. And when I talk to my players or when I coach or even my kids, there's a time and place to be emotional. We've already talked about that, right? But at some point, you have to look at everything rationally and understand that maybe this isn't your time, but how are you going to work through the down times? And I just can't say for sure what's happening with Martial, but it is frustrating, and it's getting to a point, or at least it's getting pushed to a point that there needs to be a break between the club and the player, and allow him to go do his thing, and United could go do theirs as well. So it's hard to say. I mean, I can see why the fans are on top of Martial, and I can understand why the fans are on Rangnick as well. Like there's a lot of pressure playing for United. I can't even imagine what that experience is like. However, I will say that one of my teammates of the national team back in the day, Chris Armas, is now an assistant coach for Rangnick. So I'm hoping at one point, like 3 or 4 years down the line, wherever Armas is at that point, I'd love to go get a beer with him and be like, yo, so tell me about Manchester United. Tell me about that experience. So I'm looking forward to having that conversation with him in the future.
You ruined it. That I was going to impress you with that stat, and then you just mentioned it. I was like, no.
Listen, I'm a host. It's what I do. It's what I do.
I know.
I'm sorry.
Because I found it and I thought this is going to impress him, and then you just said it. You ruined it. Right, I'm going to ask you about sort of Rangnick later, but just a little bit to carry on with the World Cup talk. Right, there was a moment, right, February 7th, 2007, 52nd minute. Landon Donovan is on the corner, right. Jimmy Conrad does a bit of a body feint, shrugs off a Mexican defender. He loses his marker, and then a bullet header right to the bottom left corner, right? What's that feeling like? What was the reasoning behind this, motion with your hands for like 2 seconds? And what's it like just to score that goal?
Well, that was my first game I'd ever played against Mexico. I had been on the bench for 2 games against Mexico. One was in 2005 when we beat them in Columbus to qualify for a World Cup. So imagine beating your biggest rivals to qualify for a World Cup. Just to be on that 18-man roster was awesome. To be on the field, to experience that, even if I didn't get to play, just an incredible life experience. So now you fast forward to 2007. I finally get a crack at playing against them myself, and it's in Phoenix. There's 80,000 fans. My old club coach, the one that told me that I needed to only choose one sport, he's in the stands. He's there watching me.
Oh, wow.
So you have all these things that are going on. My wife is pregnant with our first child. She's at home. All these things that are starting to happen in your life, and you're coming off a World Cup where you held your own. You're feeling pretty confident. Now, this is our first national team game, like our first real national team game, because we'd had a friendly prior to that, I think against Sweden or Denmark. But our first big one, post 2006 World Cup, they didn't because they had fired the manager afterwards. There was really nothing set up in the schedule to play any games. So they just waited till the beginning of 2007 to start playing games again. So this is our first big one. And what's funny about that game was that I visualized the night before that I was going to score. For whatever reason, I was like, I'm going to score. I can feel it. And so when we're in the first half of the game, Landon's taking all the free kicks, as he does. And that was a center back. There's nothing pisses me off more than when I go up for a free kick or a corner, and the guy taking the free kick doesn't get it past the first person, the first person at the near post.
I do this all the time.
Oh my God. Listen, it drives me absolutely nuts because I now have to be the first person back to help start defending. I got to sprint my ass back. Like he can be like, oh man, I'm so bummed I didn't hit a good, but I'm the one that's expected. So I just ran up 50 yards. And now I got to sprint back 60. Put that ball in a good spot so I have a chance on it. So he hit about 3 or 4 free kicks in that first half, and all of them were crap. So I sat next to him in the locker. He's wearing 10. I've got 12. Number 11 was, I forgot who it was, maybe Brian Ching, or I don't remember who it was, but they were out warming up at halftime. So it was me and Landon sitting next to each other in the locker room at half. And I said, dude, can you just put one like in a spot where I can attack it? And he goes, yeah. Sorry, man. I got to hit some better ones. And I'm like, I just want a chance on the ball. And so that is the first set piece after halftime. So 7 minutes after we had that talk or whatever,
Yeah.
that's our first one. So I score on it, and he's the person I run to because I want to start laughing. I'm like, dude, that's exactly what I wanted from the very beginning. And what's crazy is I've never scored for my national team before. I didn't know what to do with my hands. I was like, what do I do with my hands? And that's why you see kind of me do this little hand motion, which I've never done in my life. I've scored enough goals that I'd never done that in my life. And I just didn't, it was more like, I can't believe I just scored against Mexico after just telling you to put it in the mixer so I had a chance. So there's all these like little emotions that were wrapped into that particular moment. And to have been not only scored the match winner against our biggest rival and to do it in front of all those people, but you know, in Kansas City, I had been told that people at a bar were watching, chanting my name. You know, my youth coach was there. My wife was losing her mind at home. You know, everybody it was crazy. I was named man of the match. And the amount of texts I got after that game were crazy. And it was a really, I may get goosebumps talking about it. Like, I can't even believe that was me that did it, but it was a great performance and something I'm very proud of course.
And it was actually a very, you know how you get corners, right? And they're like, oh, it's a decent header and whatever. But because I've seen this clip, because you always show this clip on YouTube, right? So I've seen it so many times, but I've never I fully tried to analyze it because I thought I'm getting the Jimmy Conrad on my podcast. I need to analyze this like there's no tomorrow. This is the greatest ever goal in American football history, right?
I agree
with
you.
I'm there analyzing. And the corner, the ball just spinning around beautifully. Your movement as well, how you shrugged off the defender, you got past him, and then you sort of were in this standstill position, and then you just use the power of your neck to boom. It was beautiful. It actually is a beautiful goal as well.
Oh, thank you. I would say what's interesting is that I was going to make, well, I was actually acting like I was going to make the near post run and took that step towards the near post and then ducked around to kind of lose my marker. And it worked to the back post. And when the ball first came, because Carlos Bocanegra, who was my college teammate, just to bring him back into it, he had made the near post run. And when the ball was coming over, it was not too high, but high enough where I thought, okay, I could probably head this back over to Carlos. This is no joke. I'm thinking about this. Like, I should probably head it back to where it came from. And I'll have the people that are crashing the near post, it'll probably fall to them and we'll score, or at least have a good opportunity. But I honestly took a quick glance when I was making that decision. And I saw that nobody was on the post, and I saw that Osvaldo Sanchez wasn't sliding over. So I just gave it the old, oh, let's just see what happens. And I just gave it the, you know, the whole like torque of my body and my neck, and I hit it. I hit it as perfect as you can hit it.
It was clean.
It's so clean. It's so clean. The fact that I didn't have to jump is pretty remarkable, but I hit it as clean as you possibly could hit it. And I had enough power on it that Osvaldo Sanchez couldn't get there. And it felt pretty sweet because that guy's kind of a dick. So it's all good.
No, but it's like if you watched it, if you could see it from behind, it just, because you don't jump, it makes it look even better. It's like the power of your neck. It's like your entire career sort of builds up inside you.
That's funny. Yeah.
One goal.
I hadn't thought about that. That's a good metaphor. I like that.
I think that because it was, and like I said, I've seen it so many times, but it was amazing just to actually.
I like to brainwash everybody. I clearly have you brainwashed it. It's the greatest goal in America.
It is. I'm going to tell everyone it is. Everyone knows it. If you're pregnant, if your wife was obviously pregnant, then if you have two daughters as well, but if you had a son, would you have named him Landon? Surely,
that's a good question. No. I think if we were gonna name it, if we had a boy, it would have been Kale James. But we didn't have a boy. I got two beautiful girls, so I'm gonna stick with. I wouldn't even know how to raise a boy at this point. I'm so locked in on raising girls. It's great.
Just sort of last sort of few questions. You are essentially now, you know, obviously everyone's career ends, and you've spoken about it before. So I don't want to touch on that. You've spoken about it brilliantly on the True Geordie podcast, which I watched like 5 years ago. I can't believe it's been 5 years since you were on there.
Same.
It's mental. But you are now, the way I see it, you're now the Ralph Rangnick of American football, because you are the head coach of and I think I can't remember where it is now. Where did I write
San Francisco Glens?
Yeah, the head coach of San Francisco Glens. And you're an associate as well. If I'm right, is that right? Or you were an associate as well. What's that been like, sort of going into management now, and sort of having your own players, and what are you sort of telling them that maybe you weren't told at the time?
Yeah, I think I want to give a shout out to the Glens first and foremost. Mike McNeil runs the club, and he's tremendous. He's a Manchester United supporter as well, so you already have a kindred spirit there. He was just open to me being involved, and really at the level that I was open to being involved, and how much time that I had. He knew that I had a lot of media responsibilities, and obviously I take a great deal of pride in being a dad, so I want to be around and present for my daughters. So it's the finding that balance, and ultimately the Glens, who have a youth academy, that's where they have a lot of their success. But at the top of that, they have this USL League 2 team, and that is kind of a path to pro. So it's for the players, ultimately, in my opinion, that maybe fell out of not getting drafted out of college and want to get a taste of what the professional life is like. And then if you play well there, it's a stepping stone for us to open some doors for you to the higher divisions, whether it's the USL Championship, which is the first division, USL League 1 now is the third division, or all the way up to MLS. And because I have a lot of those connects and a lot of my friends are now coaching, it's really easy for me to pick up the phone if you're a special player and hopefully move you along. And so I bring a lot of different things to the table for the Glens, not only from a marketing standpoint, because of my social media presence and everything that I'm doing, but also as a coach with my experience and with my network. So I tick a lot of boxes for them. And it was a great experience. I think now, unfortunately, the last 2 seasons have been canceled because of COVID. We just don't have the budget. It's not a very big budget team. I'm not Pep Guardiola over here to get $1 billion to spend on defenders or whatever, but
you'd win every single league.
That's true. You won
a Champions League by now, even though you're not playing in Europe.
There's a big conversation to be had about how successful Pep Guardiola would be without a budget, but that's a different podcast.
We bring him over to the Glens.
That would be amazing. And he would help, of course. I mean, the guy's got tremendous experience, but when they tell him, by the way, you can't buy any players, you got to develop these. I think he would do great. I mean, he obviously brought tiki-taka or some form or version of it to the Premier League when people didn't think it was possible. And it helps when you have the money to buy the players that can play the style that you want. But I'm curious to see if he had taken over West Brom. What could Pep Guardiola do with West Brom? I'm a little bit more curious about that. And hopefully he'll try that at some point in his career once he's won everything he could possibly win. But with regard to me, I think I really related to these players in this space because they're the ones that maybe aren't getting as much attention, just like I was as a player. And how can I bring them along and give them some tips as to little things that I think will help them grow their game and get better? And that's what I really took a great deal of pride in. Plus, I got to try some things. I'm a big fan of team shape. I think that if your team has good starting positions, you can solve 90% of the problems. Again, it gets back to what Richard Goff told me a long time ago, that you put out fires before they start. And if you have a very organized team, defensively, imagine how good you can be in transition, because once you win the ball, you'll know where everybody is. So I would work on different scenarios where we would trap the ball in the middle of the field, because I'm probably giving away too many secrets here, but I think that the biggest ego players are in the middle of the field. They'll always try to play out of every situation. So you lean into that, knowing that they're going to try to play out of the situation. So you let that player actually get the ball, and then you lock down everything else. And then you're as honest as you can be defensively. And usually they're going to try to thread the needle. They're going to try to play out of it. And if you can nick that ball and go the other way, then you lend yourself to a lot of good scoring scenarios. So I did this with the Glens, and our first goal of the season was exactly this. We played it into a player in the middle of the field. He tried to get tricky. We won it. 2 passes later, we're in the back of the goal. I was like, the buy-in from the players was amazing. Yeah. Now, where we struggled with actually, and what I learned was I want to start recruiting players that understand how to make plays and recognize danger, have that awareness. All of a sudden, we get too casual. Listen, I coached 10 games. We had the lead in 7 of those 10, and we didn't win any of those 10 games.
Oh, wow.
I was like, what is even happening right now? We had the lead in 7 out of 10 games, and we couldn't manage the lead. And I was like, God, it was such a great experience.
Mode again.
What's that?
It's like your FIFA career mode again. What are you doing?
Oh, come on. Don't you listen. Inyo in, Inyo forever. All right. So I'll take any slander of my career mode, but you're right. That's one. Second, I just couldn't understand. And I had to really learn as a coach, okay, we've got kind of got the high press down, and we know the cues as to when that triggers everybody else, but we don't do a very good job of when we have a lead that we can sit back a little bit and then pick our spots as to when we want to win the ball. And for me, I'm a big believer that even if you don't have the ball, you can still be in control of the game. And getting everybody to buy into that and to see it and to feel it and to know it, it takes a certain group of players and a mentality that exists. And we had it for about 60 minutes of a game, but we didn't have it for that other 30. And then in that 30, it just be chaos. We were giving up great, crazy good chances. And sometimes those would lead to goals and then our heads would go down. And I'm just like, we need to find players that know how to manage a game. And that's hard to teach. That's not something that gets talked about a lot because, and I don't know why, but that's a really important part of the game that now that I'm coaching at the youth level for my youngest daughter and helping out with the high school that's nearby, I like to volunteer my time and brainwash America's youth. and I learned that they don't have a lot of in-game management skills. And that is fascinating to me.
Wait, just tell them I scored the best ever goal in American football. That's all.
That's it. Well,
that's
you're
They'll
right.
all
That's
grow
what
up
I should
wanting
do.
to be Jimmy Conrad. So we've only got 2 minutes left. So I want to do a quick 60-second round where I ask you a load of questions and then just one final question, if that's all right.
Yeah.
So are you ready?
Shoot.
Right. Okay.
Yeah,
apple
ready.
juice or orange juice?
Orange juice.
Pineapple on pizza, yes or no?
I'm okay with it.
Oh no, you want to go yes. What's the last thing you bought?
Ooh, the last thing I bought was this book called Caste by Isabel Wilkerson, which should be mandatory reading for all the kids in this country. It talks about the caste system here in the U.S. and slavery, and it's an unbelievable book that I want to share with as many people as possible, and you should read it.
Okay. What's the best advice you've ever received?
The best advice I ever received was from Marcelo Balboa's dad. Marcelo Balboa played in 2 World Cups for us, and we saw his dad at a youth tournament. And I asked him, how did Marcelo play in 2 World Cups? And I would give you a 20-minute answer. You can tell I like to talk. He simply said to me, he just went out and worked on his game every day for 2 hours by himself. And that changed everything for me because I was 15 and I realized that it was up to me to decide how good I was going to be at anything. And that was a watershed, pivotal moment in my life.
What's the most valuable item you own?
Most valuable item I own. Hot damn. You know what? I have some stuff I have is priceless. I have a Zinedine Zidane autographed boot over there behind me. Yeah, I have Andrea Pirlo's jersey, who I switched with him at the World Cup in 2006. So these are priceless items. I don't know. I have a whole bunch of that type of stuff, but maybe the Pirlo jersey. He's quite a legend.
He is. What's one thing that Man United fans can expect of Chris Almas?
I would expect someone who is incredibly dedicated to the team. He was a tremendous teammate to me when he didn't have to be. He had been around and had, I don't know, 50, 60 more caps than I had when I showed up. And he was always really thoughtful and empathetic to, here's a new guy. I could not pay attention to him like some of the other older guys were, or I can bring him along and see if I can help him get even better because I can see that he's got something that could help our team. He's an incredible human being. And I think in time, that's going to be very clear. And he's going to be a valuable asset to the players in particular.
What would you say is the best thing about your job?
That I get paid to talk about the beautiful game. I don't know if there's anything better than that, to be honest.
No, I think that is a pretty ideal job. What's one thing you change about the world?
Wow. That's a heavy question. I mean, ultimately, I wish there was empathy. I wish there was more empathy in the world. And I think social media has made everything a little bit more divisive. And I wish that, and through the game, I try to preach inclusivity instead of exclusivity. I think we're a lot more similar than we want to give or even admit to each other sometimes, whether we look the same or have different cultural beliefs or different religious beliefs or whatever. And so that's why I love the game, because if you have a good first touch, then you get to be on my team because I want to win. But yeah, I think yeah, more inclusivity and more empathy for people that are, because everybody's struggling with something.
Yeah, last 2 questions. What did your parents teach you that you want to pass on to your children?
Just to make sure that I'm enjoying what I'm doing. I remember that my parents didn't know much about the game when I was growing up. And I think that helped me create my own identity and not necessarily try to be something that they wanted me to be. So ultimately, after every game, they said, well, did you have fun today? It wasn't about, why didn't you make those passes? Or what are you doing here? They just like, did you have fun? I was like, yeah, I think I did. And then if I didn't have fun, they would just tell me, well, make sure you don't lose that spark of fun. And I make sure I pass that along to my kids.
I love that. So my last question, I started this podcast last year because first year of university was sort of ruined by COVID. I'm 20 years old. I have no idea what I want to do with my life. So I was like, you know what, let me start a podcast and meet some people and see if anyone's got any advice for me. So I want to ask you this question. If you could go back and speak to your 20-year-old self, what would you tell me?
Oh man, this is this is a loaded question. There's a lot of different directions I can go here. I would say to just to lean in on who you are and what you're about. I mean, I feel pretty satisfied with how my career turned out and the decisions I made to get me into those spots and to make the most of those. I would say, actually, now that I look back, and this wouldn't be my 20-year-old self, this would be my 29 or 30-year-old self. Because after the World Cup, I had accomplished everything I set out to do. In fact, I accomplished more than I ever thought I was capable of. And I had a bit of a drop off. And I think I was depressed, as weird as it is to say, after the World Cup. And I stopped doing the little things that maintained, or what helped me get there. You know, whether it was obviously adding a child and the pride I take in being a dad. I'm sure all these little things started to add up. But I think ultimately it was the pressure and expectation. I wasn't trying to catch anybody anymore. Everybody was trying to catch me. And that was a new experience for me that I wasn't necessarily prepared for. And I didn't go talk to anybody about it. I wish I had done some therapy. I wish I had talked to a life coach or somebody that could have straightened me out and take some of that pressure that I was now internalizing and trying to figure out on my own. So yeah, maybe this is more for my 30-year-old self, where I just don't stop doing the little things that help you get to where you want to go.
And that's it for this week's episode of the Me, Myself, and Hopefully You podcast. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did interviewing Jimmy Conrad. It was an absolute pleasure. I've been watching Jimmy for God knows how many years, all the way back to his Kick TV days. I remember coming home from school and watching him talking about the weekend games, watching his career mode, and just, yeah, if you're an OG warm baller, if you know what that is, then I don't know, does Jimmy still say that? He does say it a bit. It always comes up on the comment section. But I mean, if you're an OG warm baller, let me know. Because I feel like I am as well. But yeah, if you enjoyed the episode, then please do hit that like button and let me know what was your favorite part of the episode in the comments below, and share it with your friends. Maybe they love Jimmy as well, or maybe they can learn to love Jimmy, because why wouldn't you love Conrad? Why would you not love him? Anyway, thank you so much again, Jimmy, if you're watching this end bit. I really do appreciate it. It was an absolute pleasure, and I hope to have you again soon, because I bet you have got a million more stories that I would love to unravel. And yeah, if you enjoyed it, smash that like button, like I already said. Follow us on Spotify as well, because the next episode is going to be a banger, right? Next time you see this, I'm going to sit down with a Navy SEAL veteran who's been in the Navy, or was in the Navy, for 27 years, and undertook undercover, undersea, that's a lot of underwords there, undersea operations that could have only been approved by the United States of America. Yes, we talk about that. Mental. You know, if I die after that podcast is out, you'll know exactly who did it. Joe, I'm looking at you, mate. Anyway, yeah, make sure you stay tuned for that. But other than that, thank you so much for watching. Have a great week. Until next time.